Having a Gas is the podcast that talks the great and the good of the creative industries, and in particular finds out what makes great music for film, for TV, for commercials, for dancing to, for cooking to, for f***ing to, and more. Today, I'm having a gas with Simon Hewitt, the MD of Orange Panther Collective, a new startup that was spotlit in Campaign Live as one to watch. Simon brings with him an impressive amount of experience handling accounts for major agencies, so I wanted to data mine him for as much advice as I could get. I guess we'll start by saying, first of all, Simon, how has the first 2 months of 2021 been for you?
Hi mate. Thank you for the little intro. The start of this year has been busy, which is really good. I mean, the OPC is now what we were conceived. We were conceived in pre-lockdown in January, February last year, and born in May of last year. So between conception and birth, we went into the biggest global pandemic since the Spanish flu, I think it is, and certainly the biggest sort of crisis in the UK since World War II. So that meant it got a little bit complicated between conception and birth. But actually, I'm going to say that it didn't. We didn't really change anything. The only thing we did was changed our narrative, I think, of who we are a little. Because ultimately we were set up to be a remote working, fully integrated creative agency. So taking all our backgrounds from the world of, my background is M&C Saatchi, into AMV, into Red Bee, which is basically BBC Creative now, and then into Leo Burnett, and then into Engine or Trailer Park, and then became sort of part of the big Engine mothership. Taking all that background and basically everything done before, but say small little, and like we talk about a little orange speedboat rather than potentially oil tankers, which we left behind. But we might flog that one a little bit too much, but it helps for some conversation starters. We were definitely set up to be this integrated agency doing everything we've done before, but remotely without all the overheads, and that big story about how we can be much more cost effective. And you only have who you need in the room, and we're much tighter, sharper little unit. And then because of lockdown, that narrative was fine, but we were basically, everybody was working remotely and everybody was, doing things a little bit differently, very differently. So the big sell of like us just being an integrated remote agency living on Zoom and only one of two or three was suddenly, no, everyone's doing that. The whole world is doing that. So that kind of killed that narrative a bit. But actually the great thing that came out of it and the great thing that we got excited about was the flip to it and the real silver lining, I suppose. And I hate saying that around something so horrible as COVID, but from a commercial and business opportunity silver lining, it meant that every single prospective client operated in our world, right? So everybody kind of was totally fine with it. They didn't need to be in offices. They didn't need to do the whites of the eyes in that respect. And my God, I'm a fan of whites of the eyes. I'm an account man for 20 years. Whites of the eyes is so important. But the remote world suddenly was validated by every single client around the world, and suddenly to easier to get business, actually, ultimately. But that is a long-winded way of saying if that was our setup and that's who we are and that's who we set out to be. As we've moved from May of last year into this year, we've grown pretty quickly and it's quite a healthy environment for us. And we hit the ground running in January, finishing off a project for the Financial Times. So working with big traditional brands there. But really are now working on 4 projects in the sort of scale-up community, which is where our core focus is. And, busy, a lot of, especially D2C scale-ups, like D2C brands, they are busy during these times. COVID has given them way more opportunities than potentially they had before. And we are trying to sort of work with that and open that up. So that's an incredibly long-winded response to your question, which could have been, busy January and February.
But no, it gave us everything we need to go on with because, there are 2 or 3 major interesting ideas there. And let's start with the first one, which is at the outset, I didn't even know this, and we already know you. I didn't even know that your initial proposition was to be a novel remote agency. And then suddenly the events transpired to make it so that everyone was in the same position as you. So do you anticipate that if the pandemic hadn't happened, you would have had to invest much more energy into just selling the concept across that you can work remotely?
Yeah, I think, and again, who knows, right? Because the journey we've gone on is a journey we've gone on, and all the influences that have informed that have done just that. And so we've changed. Well, yeah. So I keep saying we changed shape, but I believe that we probably would have gone harder on we are unique because of our business model and because of our construct, rather than because of who we want to talk to. So rather than we're now positioning ourselves based on our audience rather than based on what we do, our model basically. And so, yeah, I think we probably would have gone more and we can do everything those guys do, but we're just smaller. We're big agency thinking, little agency attitude was one of our kind of first posts. And that would be something which we would have kind of held on to. Yeah. And obviously, and I think also brand brackets and little agency costs, so basically we can effectively go to, we are having conversations with some of our old clients who are big global brands. And, that's a narrative to a degree that we can have with them is you can have everything you had before, but with a smaller, more attentive, more cost effective, and actually a more specialist team, because we'll bring in exactly who you need. You don't, sometimes, you're sat in a room in my previous life with 10 people in a room, 3 or 4, which you probably don't need.
Yeah.
They're there because, they are, the CSD wants to make sure that the account director does the leading, and then the account director wants to make sure the account manager gets an opportunity. And my God, that's so important for people to learn. And I think you've got to find better ways of getting people to learn. The point is, you can definitely have a load of people in the room who aren't there, and also maybe just don't know how to answer certain challenges. Whereas we're no, you own people you need, and they will all have a very, very specific responsibility to work with you and grow your business. But yeah, I think we definitely realized as the world joined us in this remote working, Zoom, as we talked about at the beginning, Zoom landscape, we realized that wasn't enough. So we definitely kind of took some time to really focus on our strengths and also our passions. And the two together kind of led us into this world of, we think, working with startups and scale-ups. We've got a real passion for working with startups, but we're smart enough to know that scale-ups have money and startups often don't have money. So there's definitely differentiation. And we've got loads of differentiating factors, looking at people who are seed stage people versus, early stage growth versus late stage growth, whether they are pre-any funding versus series A, B, C, D, E funding, and there's loads of different now types of client that we know within the world of scale-ups. What we knew is we were passionate about helping new brands. And what we knew is we needed to go with guys who got a bit of money. And we put those two things together. And we also know that particularly from a strategic perspective, Lorna, our strategy partner, she spent a lot of time in innovation agency after Leo Burnett and Creature of London. She then went to an innovation agency called Bow Arrow. And that understanding of the business acumen, the way in which a lot of new businesses are working, because obviously they're very innovative, that expertise has really kind of helped us feel like we know our shit. So passion and expertise together, it works, it makes sense, and it's working really well. Everyone's like, oh, this is great, it's brilliant. And funny enough as well, we're also working a lot of food and beverage brands in the startup, scale-up world. And that I think is probably because it's a passion point for us. We are foodies. Lorna and I met working on McDonald's, which I know if you're a foodie, you can't associate the two, but it's an amazing brand. And I think we're comfortable in that world. I also used to work on Guinness. I worked on Sainsbury's. So things where we understand that world very well. So it's also interesting how you end up gravitating to that. We definitely don't want to be stuck in we just do food and bevs, because we don't. We're working with office-based brands, bike subscription brands, very varied businesses, and the FT, as we say, for example.
What we often do is we start from the beginning. So to know why we are where we are, we've already been through the fact that you've got a wealth of agency experience, big agency experience. So first of all, what brought you in and what took you on your journey? Why did you make the decisions you made about who you worked for and what you wanted to do?
So, I suppose within that, who we wanted to work for and what we wanted to do. I mean, starting at the beginning, so the reason why OPC exists, and I would always quite...
Simon, I'll clarify. You as an individual, when you started your career, why did you get into it, and what drove you through the agencies that you went through before OPC?
Okay. I got into advertising. So my first gig was job was at M&C Saatchi. So got in was applying for the grad scheme, and then was offered a job partway through. Partway through. I think I got into like a third or fourth round interview, and then a job came up, and I took that. I jumped obviously with 2 feet into that, and I got to do sort of part of the grad scheme while I was working on. It was the good old Dixon Stores group. So it was the big sort of, a lot of it was moving fridges and freezers around a DPS in the middle of the sun. That's kind of like where we started. And I think from someone who's very creatively motivated, which is why I wanted to get into the industry. I wanted to be a creative. I think I'm definitely put myself down as a frustrated creative. I didn't do art at university. I didn't do any art. I didn't do any particularly creatively focused degree. And so I didn't really know kind of how to get into it from a really proper purist creative perspective. Did a couple of D&AD courses and learned a few things, but ultimately I thought I'll just do the account man bit while I'm, trying to work out how I can flip over to being a creative.
Yeah.
And then of course, 20 years later, here we are. So I suppose, creative aspirations got me into advertising. But then I went to M&C, learned a hell of a lot from an account man perspective at M&C, working on something that is like very basic, purely retail, but didn't learn much from a creative perspective. So I then shifted from there. I went to work at AMV on Sainsbury's. So again, I was working retail, but a much more creative retail business. And that enabled me to kind of make that step closer. And then when at AMV, I then shifted to work on Guinness, Chrysler, Jeep and Chrysler, remember those days, and Aviva. But point was, I kind of like, once I was on Guinness, then you sort of really realize you're getting much nearer the heartland of creativity within the industry. I got to work on the very end of the Know It You Love campaign, which was the Mud Skipper ad. Yeah, go back in time from guys at the bar to mud skippers, drinking out of the pot of the puddle, and then did some like other really fun work on Guinness, and then Red Bee came a knocking, and I got very excited about the prospect of working on BBC Sport and BBC One. And so I'm a big football fan, and most sport actually, but particularly football. And I got to work on 5 years of FA Cup marketing and Six Nations and a lot of the golf and this. And it sort of, that was kind of really good fun. And BBC Creative is very different, very different world. There's a lot. As an account man, you're much closer to the creative work there. It's far less traditional. You make so much work. Budgets are massive, but with the BBC, often they don't need to be, because things like you don't have to pay for a lot of usage. And I loved it. Did 6 years there. Found it very hard to leave. But then I definitely got to a point where I felt I was stagnating a little, and I missed some of the more cutthroat advertising world. So then I went to Leo's to work on McDonald's, which I loved. 5 years there, amazing client, one of the best client relationships I've ever had. Lovely people, a lot of really good work, really strong relationship based on trust. So not much testing, not much pre-testing, which in most brands, obsessively would be hearing all the stories of sort of, not to slight anybody, but Kellogg's, for example, would, and a lot of pre-testing would be going on with them or some of the other brands, and it was a lot of the P&G stuff again, lots of pre-testing. But we didn't on Macca's, and that was based on just a really good relationship and a lot of data. There was a lot of data that sort of supported the fact the work was performing, but I like to think it was based on relationships. Of course it would, because I was semi in charge of those relationships. Yeah. Anyway, then and this, I don't know if I could make this any shorter, I probably could try, but then I went to work at Trailer Park, because having done 5 years at Leo's, my concern was I was just very traditional. Yeah. Because even though it's fully integrated work, it was still a lot of, and the age-old thing about just spending too much time and effort on the big ad, which is just incredibly old school now and was pretty old school then 4 or 5 years ago. Although, often most of the conversations you were having with when you went to present the work, the clients in the room would be like, okay, love the thinking, but what's the telly look like? So you're slightly damned if you do, damned if you don't on that side of things.
So just as someone who's relatively new to the industry, like myself, what's the meta story there? You're saying that there's a tendency towards like orthodoxy and doing things in a very traditional way that blinds you to what certain types of thinking?
I think there is historically, and again, I think it's definitely changed, but back then, so this was in sort of 2016, let's say 15, 16, there was a need to shift thinking into fully holistic 360 ideas that were channel agnostic. And that was...
So it can go on TV and it can go on Instagram.
The idea can run anywhere and everywhere, whatever channels are relevant to communicate what you want to communicate. And again, there's a conversation about what comes first, the idea or the media plan kind of thing. But, let's assume that, you're starting with just an idea and you need to communicate it to whatever the relevant audience, and you know that it needs to play out in different channels. You've probably got a young youth audience as part of it. And within that, you definitely need to go big on the digital side of things, rather than just traditional sort of TV. And so McDonald's, who talks to everybody, literally their target audience is everyone. You need to make sure that ideas played in loads of different channels and was really relevant and authentically conveyed in social media just as much as it is in a big TV ad, just as much as it is in Lovely Out of Home, just as much as it is in anything, any touch point, right? But the problem was, we would still then, this is back in again 2015, is like think about what the TV ad's going to be and then try and translate it into other channels. And that is just not the right way of doing it. You need to think about the idea and start with it at the core and then explode it out and look how you can tell the story in different channels.
Right.
Rather than what's the telly ad look like and then everything sits underneath it. So that was a challenge. That was a tug of war. And lots of creators would still write a big TV ad and they go, yeah, but this tells us what it looks like. And then we can kind of like go from there. And the problem was the fuel to that fire. And the hardest thing was that when you went to present work, 90% of the time, all that anyone in the room really cared about was what was my, $300,000 or $400,000 TV ad going to look like, because there's so much, the production costs are so high behind that. All the attention and effort was on that. So whilst we were absolutely trying to be channel agnostic with presenting work, no one really cared until they saw the TV ad. So inevitably you ended up worrying about the TV ad first, which then fuels the problem that the agency had internally of always thinking about the TV ad first. So that became this like vicious circle. But that's definitely been broken down now, and clients see very differently, and it's just very different. And also, now in my world, we don't, there's no TV, it's all AV. And when it's AV, it's sort of content, and it's that content play out in a 30 to 60, 90 second spot that will run on some form of TV, probably an SVOD platform, or an OTT, give it a name, but kind of an OTT platform, or whether it'll run, pre-roll or whatever it will do, or whether you'll create longer form content that just sits behind a content strategy that can do bigger storytelling.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm sort of slightly going off track, but to answer your question, that was the challenge then. That's now totally different. But so that does, I guess, segue into my journey, back into my journey. So I left Leo's to go to Trailer Park, which is a very famous trailer production company in LA.
Yes.
With pretty much all the big, or half the big movie trailers. They're on Hollywood Boulevard. They've got this big building. They're very, very famous over there. And they surfaced in the UK as part of the Engine family. And I came in to kind of head up the client services, account management team. And basically I wanted to do it because I felt if I got into much purer content, I was no longer in traditional advertising. And again, for everything I've just said, it felt like it was a smart move to break out of that slightly tedious, still the big TV ad. Let's go and look at content, and content, short, medium, long form content, digital first content, And so I jumped and I went and ran Red Bull and the Olympic Committee were my main two pieces of business. And so, working with Red Bull on content is like a dream.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is you're actually creating content about content. So I think a bit like Inception, you try to work out how deep you've gone into the dream state. But we were creating promotional content to promote existing content about all the amazing sports stuff they do. So from cliff diving to various different 2-wheel, 4-wheel, motocross, motorsport, to skiing, and snowboarding, to, et cetera, et cetera. But that was really interesting. And I definitely experienced a very important journey, which was when I started, it was brand first, audience second. And then they realized, we helped them go on the journey of, really needs to be audience first. You need to understand where your audience is, what they want, where your audience is, what would engage them, what's missing in their lives, whatever you can do to basically get a microcosm of their attention, but in the platforms they're in. So create content to live on the platforms they're in, and don't try and rip them out of those platforms and come to you because you're so amazing, brilliant, and use your app or whatever. So that was definitely an experience, learning experience. And then last year, I'd done 3 years, which I think is always sort of the minimum magic number for me at somewhere. And also Trailer Park had gone, and it'd become one engine, and it was engine film or engine content. And I think engine didn't really know what to do with it. Plus Red Bull were taking more stuff in-house, and the IOC were taking more stuff, just being a bit more unclear as to what they wanted. So I, with that in mind and the aspirations to do my own thing, jumped into OPC, and as I say, I left in February last year, and we came to life in May.
Wow. I mean, that is quite a story, all told, and especially getting embroiled in the, what would you call it? You were like a foot soldier in the raging debate between broadcast and narrowcast, the one that Hegarty weighed in on not long ago. And here's a question. So it sounds like, yes, you were saying the issue is we need channel agnostic content. We need to make sure that whatever the idea is, it can play everywhere. Which to an idiot like me says that, well, especially the issue is McDonald's want to appeal to everyone, and everyone watches on every channel, whereas some demographics use TV more, some demographics use digital more. So obviously McDonald's problem was unique in that they're trying to get to everyone, so they have to go down every channel. But a question is and I suppose it's only the general public can ask this, have there been any famous campaigns like Surfer or like Cadbury's Gorilla in the last 6 years?
Yeah, it's an interesting, and I know there's a quite hot topic of sort of, we were talking very recently about what makes good work now, and craft is something that for me it's so important to have great craft in work and great storytelling and the stuff that makes you remember it, right? The stuff that really, craft, and this is cut through in just by being loud, and then there's cut through in just being really amazing. Yeah. I was watching a series the other day, and my pronunciation is probably terrible, but it's a BBC, it's on Netflix now, but BBC worldwide, I think it was commissioned by, but it's called Guji Haji, and so it's basically about this Japanese, it's about the Yakuza sort of war that's raging between Japan and London, I guess, ultimately. And anyway, I think it's great. It's quite understated. It's well done. And then in the final episode, there is and out of nowhere, there's this amazing dance sequence. And there's not been anything like in the film. The rest of the film's been about shooting, stabbing, and, slow burn, but it's lots of really interesting relationships. And then there's this contemporary dance scene right in the middle of basically a gun battle. And I just stopped in my tracks and went, you want to sit in it for a while. And that craft and that uniqueness, I get goosebumps now. I was just like, I need to tell the world about this. This is one of the best things I've ever seen, just these 3 minutes. And that reminded me the importance of craft and the importance of craft and a little bit of, obviously a little bit of the creative magic that makes it unorthodox and unusual. But then this comment, so that's really important, and that plays to those big ads you talked about, that were pre 6 or 7 years ago. But is the new great work actually about relevance and maybe what sits underneath it is speed and agility to create really relevant work? Because obviously relevance is very short term, right? Yeah. We moved on to the next thing. And so, what's the great start? And some of the ads that seem to have really landed and made a lot of noise. So, Nike's Londoner, as an example, it feels like it's been one of the most remembered ads for a while. And that is potentially more because of the relevance for the audience and the relevance for the time than it is about craft. I mean, there is great craft in there as well, but the craft comes about in a much more like madcap, or much more, I don't even know what the word is, but contemporary iteration of craft, much more like cutty and edgy rather than beautiful and slow and big and build. So I wonder about that. And then also the recent brilliant body form work from AMV. Yeah. Again, that's longer, that's really long form. So actually that's probably the antithesis of what I just said. That's long form, beautifully crafted storytelling, but it's not an ad. It's cut down 60 seconds. It doesn't do anything for you, really. Do it in 3 minutes or whatever. I think the long form version I watched is, you're like, my wife was crying and I was just totally blown away. But that's not the surfer ad anymore. So I don't know. I sort of jumped around a bit, but I'm really interested on probably the first of those 2 points about the new good is about relevance and whatever that might mean, rather than about beautiful, slow burn, granular craft.
Yeah.
Even though as a human being, I just love craft. I love Punch Drunk Productions and those amazing immersive theatre where you go to the 58th room you've been in, and right in the very corner of that room where they could have given up, they've still stenciled something really small on the wall that's the madman talking. You're like, that is amazing, that level of detail. Anyway.
Yeah, people are obsessed over that level of detail. That tends to be where the brilliance comes in. Leave no stone unturned. And it's interesting, as you were talking about that, I got to thinking that the kind of things that come into my periphery as famous brands used to is a successful series on Netflix, The Crown, Queen's Gambit, or even not Netflix, Game of Thrones, things like this. So I don't really have a clever question formulated about this, but it's something about the fact that there is one media channel. That's just a channel, and that's just Netflix. And of course, I don't know if I am not up to date on my knowledge here, but as far as I'm aware, Netflix is completely absent of advertising. It's just a stark paywall. But yet they command public discussion in a way that advertising agencies used to. So I think that's just something worth bearing in mind. And it's interesting. It's like that effect is still created, that I still hear of things that aren't in my periphery because they become famous, but just on that single super successful media channel. But I don't know how to fashion that into a question, really.
Well, I think the Netflix effect, and I don't know if it is the question or the point, but I mean, it is amazing. I love that. I kind of can't remember the stat, but the Queen's Gambit, sales in chessboards went up 280% or something like that on the back of that. I dusted off my chessboard. Shamelessly, I've got a chessboard on the side in my living room and it kind of looks cool now, whereas 6 months ago, although the chess boxing thing that was around 5 years ago made chess kind of cool again. But the power of that. And I think Red Bull did some really good work with what's the series? One of the series about or was it not in Red Bull, but the Formula One getting under the skin of the F1 world, and brands' exposure within those stories is still definitely something that can be done and navigated or managed really well. So obviously, authentically putting brands in content that's genuinely really interesting to people is the best way of you getting something out of Netflix. But it's hard to do, and it can only be done in certain ways. And I don't know what sponsored, you don't see a particular chess brand coming up in Queen's Gambit.
That's product placement, isn't it? Rather than using media channel. Yeah. Do you think Netflix will ever have like a premium free advertising model, or?
I hope not.
Yeah, you like it as it is.
Yeah, I just think one of the merits, but one of the reasons people love it is for that, and they're willing to pay. And it still is a very small amount of money, really, but to get to just a load of really good content without any disruption. And obviously, as a man who's worked in advertising for 20 years, I hate the fact that people hate advertising. But sometimes hate advertising if I'm not in the right, but I don't want to be.
Yeah, I sometimes think, so we've got this insanely targeted media channels now. And so if I'm on YouTube and I look at a tutorial for, let's say, to do something on Premiere Pro, for the next week I get spammed with, are you a content marketer? Are you making video? And then really ham-handed stuff like, this person made $2,500 last week and you could too. And I've been wondering, and maybe you can answer this, why don't we do broadcast on digital channels? Why doesn't everyone get the same adverts? I know that will be a stupid question, but there's got to be a good reason, right?
Well, I suppose, the hyper-targeted nature of digital channels and the ability just to basically build an audience set and
smash them on the head
with very, very specific messaging which you believe is going to take them down the funnel from, so obviously you're starting at awareness through to consideration and down to conversion. I think it's smart. It's obviously smart, and it's just totally logical to make sure you are talking to the right people with the right messaging at the right time. And that's how that works. And it is smart. It's just what I do think is that a lot of brands are very lazy in the messaging that plays to those three different points of the funnel. Still make every experience, every opportunity, every moment, wherever you are, and however small a moment it is, or however big a broadcast moment it is, make all of it matter and feel interesting and relevant rather than be lazy with it. And, I know everyone's like, again, it's just trying to make it work commercially, but I don't think it's very hard to make half decent, really, granular bits of creative or bits of messaging for people. And also they, respect your audience as well. Yeah. Not people are going to go, I can make 250 quid a month on doing this. I don't know, maybe they are, but I just think respect your audience a bit more.
Don't talk down to people. They're not stupid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And everyone has a point of view, and it can turn very quickly into a negative thing if you have talked down to them and so on. And, the opportunity you're trying to capture that microcosm of attention and make them like you rather than make them think you're, the opposite.
Yeah, I also noticed that I don't know one person who looks favorably upon their YouTube pre-rolls. I think they're all skipped. I think they're all annoying. And also, they're quite, in my case, they're quite poorly targeted because they always assume I don't know anything about music theory and need like chord packs selling to me and stuff like that. So, but that's just me venting a bit of personal.
No, but that's fair enough. But in the awareness part, the top of the funnel, of course, you go a bit broader and a bit more.
Yeah.
You have to assume a little bit less knowledge. But if you're being really targeted, then you shouldn't assume too little knowledge, because you're right. Otherwise, it's granny sucking eggs, and straight away you're like, well, no, I don't want to patronize before I've even watched the thing that I want to watch. So
surely you're an advertising pro. Surely occasionally you get pre-rolls saying, "Do you want to convert more customers?"
All the time.
There you go.
And I will, sadly, there are probably some really good people out there who can help me, but I will never ever do it because I'm so fed up with it. So yeah, you're totally right. And of course, with ad blockers and everything, the ideal world is halfway between what was and what is, or something. I think in that a little bit of marketing to people, it's hyper targeted, but just not too often, and just in places where you're not really going to piss them off. Just working all that out. Or obviously you make it something that they're going to love and enjoy, but that's hard to, that is so easy to say, but very hard to do on every brand, because some brands, and maybe that's a cop out, maybe the answer is you should be able to make something really interesting and informative and fun from any brand ever, but it's not always possible. So yeah, so I think you look at all the awards stuff and it's great looking at how people have been really smart with pre-roll, but either A, they got a great product to be smart with, or B, they made something really cool and maybe it wasn't a great product, but they made something really cool, but they probably also still pissed the same number of people off who wanted to actually watch the thing that sits behind it. So it's a complicated old world, I think, that.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's move out of that and let's get on to OPC. So you were last year highlighted as one of the startups to keep an eye on, and some of them were breakaways, some of them were sister shops. So you have Other as a sister of Mother, but you have obviously New Commercial Arts, which is basically like take the motherboard out of Adam and Eve and put it into this little thing and just watch it grow. That's interesting to watch. And then you guys were spotlit as well. How did you come to the decision, with who you were going to work with? When were those conversations happening? When did the partners come together and scheme and say, let's really go for this?
So I think as soon as I decided this was going to be a thing, I say decided. I mean, that sounds like it's so, it was going to be. As soon as I thought, oh God, no, as soon as I wanted to do this and once set it up, I very quickly. So I suppose what we're saying is at the core of the OPC, there were 4. We are now 3, and we will become 4 again. But there were 4 of us, and following a bit of a traditional discipline approach, we kind of wanted to make sure we had a creative partner, a strategic partner, an operations partner, and a MD, I guess, a client services partner, as was. And again, you'll see I always awkwardly struggle with client services and account management because I think it's language that I sort of hate, but
because it sounds like management speak.
It just feels cold, and it's sort of like saying client. I hate saying client because it just feels like it just feels cold. It feels dem enough. It feels traditional, and I'm trying to break out of all that. But the thing is, when you're obviously talking about the industry, it's a shortcut. People understand it. And if I said our partners, i.e. our clients, you'd be like, do you mean you're in partner internally? Do you mean somebody's invested in the business? What do you mean? And, and it's really hard to build clarity around that sort of lexicon. So ultimately,
customer, it sounds short and transactional.
Exactly. So client, for the purpose of this conversation, account management / client services and client makes sense. So, but yeah, the 4 people, the 4 core things. So when I knew this was going to be a thing, and to be honest, I didn't know exactly what it was going to be other than, as I said, that remote working integrated creative agency. So it was definitely the business model and the fact that I could do it, again, born out of lots of conversations with my clients at Engine. And so Red Bull, for example, lots of conversations about budgets, and they go, that's quite a lot, isn't it? Like, yeah, but we are the best people who can do it. We definitely can deliver at scale. We can definitely do all these sort of things. And you can keep validating it for a while, but every month you get a little bit more like, there's other people who can probably say a lot of what we're saying. And it's getting quite hard to really validate those costs. And, mostly because we've got a massive office in Soho, and it's, the overheads are, and I know
you said at the start, we've got 10 people where you could have 4. Exactly.
So with all those things in mind, that's why, as I say, I set out to do it from this is the model we should go with. Mm-hmm. Then I very quickly, I went and had lunch, and I always remember Botasaki. I just, with Adam Tucker, who was my creative director at Leo's, and he, I had a really good chat, and he said, look, I'll support you in kind of this. I'd love to help find the right people. Always wanted to be more of a creative counsel, a bit of a sort of sitting in the background rather than being in the weeds. So that was great. So he was sort of there. But the main person who I sort of jumped into speaking to very quickly, because I think how incredibly important having, the thing that comes at the beginning, the strategy locked in, was Lorna. So I spoke to Lorna. She was freelancing back at Leo Burnett actually at the time. And this is Lorna Burt. She was freelancing with Leo Burnett back at the time. But I knew that she was interested in, I don't know, we could have a conversation. So we went for lunch, and I told her I want to do this thing. And she brilliantly was like, I sort of get it, and I sort of don't get it. What is it? What's the it? And, that set us on a journey of like, well, hold on, if anyone's going to help me define the it beyond the commercial model bit, it is you, because you are, and she's probably the best strategist I've ever worked with. And she's only sort of 31, 32, I think, which I always say because there's an assumption she might have 10 more years experience. She's not, she's sort of 10 years into this gig, and amazing thinker. But she has ad agency experience, but also went to this innovation agency that I mentioned, Bow and Arrow. So she'd had that perspective, and she'd really been, she was perfectly placed to help us define who we are and our direction of flight. So Lorna was like, again, what is this? How much am I jumping in? Am I not? Should we? So she wanted to sort of test the waters a little bit. So she was working a bit with me, helping me refine who we are, and also working on a couple of live projects. And then she brought in a couple of the strategists to help us. And then Tim and I used to work at AMV. So Tim Barth, who was head of creative services at AMV for a long time, and then went on to Publicis. And we didn't know each other that well back at AMV. I think we worked on a Guinness project together, but yeah. Tim just got in touch. Actually, it was LinkedIn genius. He just dropped me a bit of a note. He was sort of out of Publicis, wanted to sort of like reconnect with people. And I just gave him some shit for basically cold LinkedIning me, if such a thing exists. Like, have you literally just basically done a generic email message to me? And he's like, yeah, mate, really sorry. And straight away from that little bit of that little connection, that little spark of banter, we chatted. And I mean, I've never known anyone be so enthusiastic about something so quickly. And I loved him for that. He's like, just feels like the stars were aligned. It feels like this is the time I want to come on board. And, we were paying each other. I was paying peanuts. And I'd taken some money from when I left Engine, so I kind of was comfortable. I didn't know about Lorna and Tim, but Lorna was sort of relatively comfortable. Tim had a little bit, so we had a bit to kind of get us going, but still I was taking the piss. But Tim was like, don't care, love it, sounds amazing.
Yeah.
So that's how the four of us came to be. And then really it was Lorna, Tim and myself driving it. And as we went into it and did more of it, Lorna realized there was a thing here. And as she helped bring shape to it, she then went about 3 days a week, then 4 days a week, and is now full-time. And so the three of us are full-time. Adam has since sort of stepped back completely because he's got lots of other projects on, and we need someone in the weeds as much as being leading this thing creatively. So we're looking for that person at the moment. But what's really interesting is I was in a round table with a few people the other day and talking to Justin Tyndall, from Platform. And he was talking about disposable creativity. And, Justin, who was my old ECD at Leo's, I thought, one of the last people who would say that, but actually disposable creativity is how we're getting by at the moment. It's sort of, even though we work in a creative industry, we are doing very well creatively as well as strategically, but without a creative leader. But we absolutely know the value of having somebody who helps, back to that point about shaping us at our core, what we stand for creatively, what our direction of flight is creatively, because that is so, so important.
Yeah. And so this is a very exciting time to be talking. It's like we are kind of seconds into it and stuff's already happening. And, hopefully we'll be looking back at this at some point in the future and saying, wow, remember when it was just that. And so one thing that's, a good way to get into it is let's talk about FT. How did you get Financial Times? Describe the work you've done for them and the relationship and how you got it over the line.
Well, we've got like a 70-20-10 model, as so many people do in terms of our pipeline. 70% of our effort is scale-ups, startups, and scale-ups primarily, and having some very interesting conversations there, all the way up to sort of venture capital firms, talking to them about how to invest in the right businesses or the businesses they want to invest in from a commercial level, what shape we think they're in from a brand positioning and storytelling level, and basically how quickly they're going to engage with their audience ultimately. So, if you go right upstream, that's super exciting. So 70% of efforts in that world, 20% of efforts in sort of probably the world we were in before, the big brands, which is what we'll talk about now, and then 10% is wildcard. I mean, we just rebranded an adventure golf business in Putney, which kind of came out through a contact of mine, but it could turn into global domination. The guy who runs it is amazing, and he's talking to St Andrews and actually the Scottish golf board about trying to bring to life this totally new thing that's not golf and it's not adventure golf. It's somewhere in between. And he's also having conversations with people in Japan, and he's having those. It's amazing that he's such an amazing entrepreneur. But that is random as hell. But that might end up being a very lucrative and exciting opportunity for us. And they're lovely. They're great fun. Anyway, the 20%, the bit in the middle, is the FT. We're having conversations with the FT. We're talking to the BBC, talking to the IOC, talking to sort of, having those conversations because, we'd be mad to not talk to people we worked with before.
Yes.
And I'd love to get some Red Bull business. And, now that any non-competes have gone out the window, no, but, I'd love to get if I could. But FT was through the head of marketing, and within one part of it is an old BBC client of mine. And so it kind of came through that. It actually came through Conduit as well. So I'm working with a freelance marketing guy who's another ex-client of mine at BBC, and he actually opened that door for us. And actually, I reimbursed him. It's like, if you can open doors for us, we'll give you a percentage of what sits the other side of the door to keep him interested. So it's quite an interesting sort of pipeline building model if you can get a few people who are doing that for you.
Yeah.
And anyway, so last year we were invited to help them with Brooklyn Brothers did the last piece of work, which I don't know if you've seen it, but it was a bit where everybody was stuck for words. and they didn't quite know what to say next. And then they wanted to come up with a new piece of work that could talk to the US audience around the inauguration, the January inauguration.
Yeah.
And so we created something like that, and now we're adapting to go to run in Australia. And it's a piece of AV. It's the nearest thing to a TV ad that you can make. It's a 30-second spot that talks about how the Financial Times and how important the FT is for really informing people's decisions. And so we have a line which is, people don't just read the Financial Times, they use it. So that was our positioning. That was our line.
It's a tool and not a generic repository.
Exactly that. And also we were trying to sell, subscription to the FT on top of people's bread and butter subscriptions. So, again, in the US, if everyone's reading the Wall Street Journal, you're never going to take place of the Wall Street Journal, or if it's more, New York Times, whatever it might be. But to, spend an extra £3 a month on the FT, and knowing that the FT, has informed so much already in the world, and can help you make big decisions. It's like, buy this. It's a toolkit. It's a toolbox rather than just a publication.
Oh.
So that's what we have done, and that's growing. Hopefully, as I say, we've just been asked to reversion it for Australia. I'm hoping to do more of it. And I'm so excited about some conversations we're hoping to have with BBC and BBC Studios. Again, it's so early days, it may go nowhere. I'm comfortable talking about it because I think by saying having a conversation doesn't mean we've got any work, but we're trying to have some of those conversations. And I think last sort of thing I'll say on it is the thing that we really like is if our positioning is taking from big brands, who are really big, and we've helped them make it big and stay big. And we're taking that experience and giving it to the new brands on the block, the scale-ups. That's a really simple story to tell and really simple narrative. And lots of those scale-ups are excited by, wow, we have all this. You guys, you've done all that stuff. You can do that for us, and it's not as expensive. And amazing. But then also in reverse, there's so many learnings from these guys and how they operate and the things that keep them awake at night. And basically, they're all disruptor brands because new brands coming into a market, and they have to either creating a new market or they're disrupting within a market they're coming into. And all those learnings are incredibly valuable to take back to the more traditional brands and help them pivot and help them stay on the front foot and help them be disruptor brands again rather than disrupted brands. Yeah. So that is a very good narrative for the FT. That's a very good narrative for BBC. It's like, we know this world. We can now give you that. And that just goes forever.
It's really good because it's like, back to the chess analogy, it's like playing chess against yourself. You're seeing from both sides of it's not exactly a dichotomy, but it's really useful to see people who are coming up and having to adapt to the new way in order to even break through. And then you can go back to the bigger brands and say, here's how they broke through. Here's what to look out for going forward. There's a startup I want to ask you about, scale up I want to ask you about specifically. And again, caveated by the fact that I'm a young person, basically an idiot and a musician, so I don't know anything about most of the stuff that you do. And there's a brand called Smol. I don't know if you heard of them, SMOL, Smol.
I haven't. They're not. No. So I may have heard them literally just yesterday in a conversation, but I don't know whether I'm thinking about the same brand. So tell me more. Tell me more about them.
They are mail order, sustainable, recyclable detergent brand. Yeah,
exactly. So I was talking to one of my friends yesterday who she got us onto about 5 D2C sustainable products. From our toilet roll to actually Smol, she was saying they're amazing. So I was talking about making some dishwasher tablets. She said, don't buy them from anywhere, get them from Smol. So it's exactly the same thing. So only as of yesterday did I know anything about them. But tell me more.
Well, I just keep talking to people on this really, in Adland, saying someone, make them famous, take them to the next level, because they will be, I think they'll be useful for an agency because they have such brand loyalty, as you found, to people going, don't ever buy detergent again. So you know how Monzo Bank had this fierce brand loyalty, all the customers would sell them to their friends. I think Smol are going to have the same thing, partially because of the sustainability thing, which is great, and the market's growing to love sustainability. But I love the branding as well. It looks great, and they keep coming out with new products. They've now done fabric softener, and now they're doing sort of disposable, reusable surface stuff. They say, we give you the bottle, you keep the bottle, and we just keep sending you the stuff that goes in the bottle. And I think their pitch on their marketing email was like, who knew that detergents were some huge percentage water, and you all have water, so we just give you the concentrate and you fill it with water instead of shipping it around the country. Anyway, I'm gassing on, but you can see this is the kind of customer loyalty.
Yeah, well, obviously it's worked, but do they need any help because they won you over? No, but
I'm going to the market.
They're on my target. They're back on. They're on our list now. Then you're on the list, which we're going to have a word with them.
So here's something from. So we were. We probably still are viewed as a startup, but we're very small. And when I came into this, I was a waiter who had no experience of this industry, no experience in music really, and so I've had to learn everything from scratch in here, including how to win the business. And I'd be interested to know from a seasoned professional like yourself. What's the process? Do you just drop in on people's emails and go, "Hi, hope you're well. I'm Simon. I do do you need advertising? Look forward to hearing from you." What's your strategy?
That's
really?
That's it. No, so funny. I was on a networking thing last night, actually through our remote accountant.
Yeah.
So and actually, it was really interesting talking to a load of founders about exactly this. And I think, I don't know, the C part, the collective part of OPC is probably the bit that is the door opening bit for us. Because ultimately it means we work with a whole raft of people who have a lot of business. They're already doing some stuff with some people, and actually, but what they can't, they can only do 30% of what the client wants. There's other stuff the client wants. And my thing is connecting with the right people who've already got doors open. And then they invite you through that door as well.
Right.
So they are really smart, probably like more normally these people who are more the coalface, the doers. So sort of from the production end of things. But, often they don't have the briefs that they're getting aren't very good. There's no strategy, no real thinking's gone into it. So we say we will, let's get Lego analogy going. We'll kind of like bolt ourselves onto you.
Yep.
Because you've already got the business, but you bring us in and we both get to make some money. And actually that simple philosophy, that simple approach has essentially been a massive driver for us. And a lot of that's been working with contacts that people we know and understanding where they're at now and looking at kind of a lot of them have gone solo, talking to them about, if you're doing that, it's like, well, but if we go together, we become the Power Ranger, like big robot thing.
Yeah.
So there's that, but then there's also just partnerships. So I'm the biggest believer in like getting smart partnerships up running, trying to work out, again, back to doors. You open one door to a platform or partner who then have 100 doors behind that that they can open for you. Then obviously that is the smartest pipeline filler in the world. So we are a partner of Crowdcube, the crowdfunding platform. And that was through a little bit of hard graft, to be honest, of just a lot of knocking on the door for me primarily. It helps that I'm an obsessive Crowdcube funder.
Yeah.
Funded about 20 businesses on there, only small bits and bobs, but everyone's Monzo. I went to Monzo early, so I've done pretty well out of Monzo.
Yeah.
But ultimately, and I like all this stuff. I'm really interested in it. But anyway, we spoke to them. We're now part of the Funded Club. So we have at the bottom of our website and bottom of our email, Funded Club. And that basically means any business that funds through Crowdcube is introduced to a suite of potential partners, from lawyers to IT and integrated creative agencies. So we are getting business that way. So anytime anyone in the Crowdcube Funded Club wants some help from marketing side of things, we get introduced to them through a conduit who's the guy who runs it. But also we're doing masterclasses.
Yes.
We're going to do some training. Our first one's coming up in 2 weeks' time. And we will be exposed to 10 or 15 new brands, and we'll talk to them about a topic that they've chosen that's in the marketing world. And hopefully they'll go, wow, you're really smart. I want to work with you. And suddenly we get a load of new clients. And then it just snowballs from there. So to answer your question, I think it's being smart about building a team that's can already bring you into conversations that are already happening. So you're borrowing from them, but you're also making them look better than they could look on their own. So everybody wins. And having really smart partnerships in place. And then obviously there's just a bit of, of course, some talking to your old clients and just saying, hey, we worked together, we enjoyed it. I'm doing my own thing. It's everything I did before, but in a nicer version of it. Do you want to chat? And that has also worked.
I know exactly what you mean, by the way, on the thing of bolting yourself on in order to improve someone else's offering. Let me give you an example of what happened recently. So obviously our domain music I think in advertising, much discussed, least understood discipline. So, and what it usually boils down to is what track do I want that already exists, and how can I buy it, and how can we get the price down? And so we had, there was a track by Vangelis that we were asked for the other day. They said, they're asking for 6 figures, lots. Can you remake it for 5 figures? And so it was, and I think let me see, got the request at 10 p.m. on a Thursday. It was done by 4 p.m. the following day. So we're looking at about a 16, 17 hour turnaround time for what was basically an identical track with a new vocalist, a female vocalist. And whilst I'm sort of hesitant to say on the record, we didn't win the business, what it enabled our client to do was go back to the label and go, it's fine, we don't need it anymore, we've got this and it's basically the same. And they went, oh, and the price crumbled. So it's that kind of thing you're talking about, isn't it? Where even if you aren't straight there at the point of transaction immediately, you bolt on and you make someone's offering that much better.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that sounds like I suppose sounds like they used what you did for their own benefit and not so much yours. But
we're still David, not Goliath at the moment. So
yeah, no, but I do. I think and it's working out what the easiest or the best looking thing is when you combine with somebody. So from a client perspective, and the easiest thing for them to buy into. So again, full service offering is great. Lots of clients get excited by that, but actually, sometimes they don't really know what that means, because they actually also want an agency that's really niche. And that's a bit of a tug of war that we've got between doing everything, but being really specific about what we do. So our focus actually is probably more on who we do it for rather than what we do, right? So that's how we shifted.
Yeah. That's another reason why I think, your offering is going to be very attractive. The last person I did for this podcast I spoke to was Andy Nairn at Lucky Generals. And he said the way they won the Amazon account was Amazon said, look, we don't want another big business. We want to work with someone small and who thinks has a great strategy,
Yeah, well, and that, hallelujah, right? That's what we're all about. And like I said at the beginning about our model, the remote working model, was validated by every client in the world because it's the only way they could do things. But also the small, that was a functional side of it that was validated, but the actual emotional side of it, let's call it, I think brands like to feel a bit more loved. They like a bit of attention. They're happy to do things, try things a bit different as well, more than ever, I think. Also, we talk a lot about selling products rather than selling time and energy, even though a lot of the time, you have to map out a product based on time with a certain person at a certain rate. So rate cards still have a very important role to play. But, clients kind of want a product, and I think the importance of offering a toe dipping product, as we sort of call it, so come and try us, basically come and try us. And big brands can come and try us. And they go, oh my God, oh my God, you literally can do that. These guys that we're paying shitloads of money to do, you can do all that. But how do you get them in? Reassure them on your creds, which we can totally do. We've got a deck which says we've done all this stuff, aren't we? We're well placed. But just come and try us out. And I do think there's more appetite for it. I think there's more appetite for trying us out, people out. And, I love the fact that, that the world is changing, sadly, a lot of it because of something horrible. But, we're coming out the other side in a different shaped world. We're inside and outside of this industry, but we're inside of this industry. I feel really positive about where it's going, and opportunities for loads of small agencies to do really well, to thrive.
Yeah. And, like you're right to say that it's a crisis that has caused a lot of this potential to be manifested. But we also have to remember that, comfort is not what drives us forwards. And so I've got one sort of last big question for you, and that is why I was kind of glancing at the time, because I sense that we sort of consumed an hour there. And potentially controversial to talk about within the industry, but let's see where we get. I wanted maybe your take on why big shops in the last year, in particular AMV, are losing big accounts. So the reason AMV comes front of mind is because this morning's headline was, Asda taking their account for review. Quaker went to Uncommon. Walker's, I think, has gone to Elvis Communications. I believe there's a fourth one. What's going on there? What's happening?
So we talked about this a bit because, Tim and I are ex-AMV. We're also working recently with also a very senior creator called Nigel Roberts, who's at AMV. And I mean, I don't know. I don't know. And if Tim were on this, Tim would probably have a much clearer perspective on it. But I think like a lot of, like BBH was infallible for a while and then it's being infallible. AMV definitely has been infallible for a while and now it's very much stopping being infallible. I think it's a combination of, I don't know, the right people and the right ideas sitting at the heart of the work. So there's might be chemistry issues, there might be lack of I mean, again, the amazing work that came out on the body form work, I think shows that the creative ability is still massive, but admittedly there may well be also only a very small concentrated version of that. But without getting into any detail about people, I think the potentially is, the people is a factor, but also the shift to doing things differently and trying out new stuff probably means a lot of the big agencies are suffering from that. I mean, obviously Adam and Eve are a big brand, a big agency, but they are doing incredibly well. But they seem to still have this sense of being really, really dynamic, even though they are big and cumbersome and now part of a network.
Yeah.
But they've kept that dynamic edge. And I think AMV's lost that air of dynamism. And I think that's what's really hurting them. And so it's probably perception, probably reality to a degree, but a lot of perception that's just sort of crippling them. And also, sadly, when when things start getting messy, people talk and it spreads. And so lots of people start jumping ship. And I mean, I hand on absolute heart, hope to hell that it turns around because, I loved working there. We have a massive soft spot for AMV. If I could get 1% as successful as any of those guys, I would be incredibly proud. So for all the reasons why I certainly don't take any joy from it. And I do hope that things will themselves out. And I'm sure they will. And I'm totally sure they will. I think it's just sadly everybody has, it's like things start going wrong. It all just sort of happens at the same time. It becomes
a kind of spiral, isn't there? Yeah.
Yeah, there is. But then it gets turned around, like Grey was turned around. BBH came back up. A lot, I don't know, lots of the agencies that were once upon a time written off have come back and come back stronger. And actually, shrinking and being more agile and being more relevant might be where they get to. And that might make them a much more interesting shape than where they are now. So actually, out of this painful time, hopefully will become a real silver lining that they'll change shape and become more on point and more exciting to other brands.
Yeah, you are right, because I think I sense the centerpiece of your response there was the same as, the poem Ozymandias. Yeah, so it's like, no matter how big an empire is, it will one day be in ruins. But we're not there with regards to this, because it's not just AMV. They were just a good example. Adam and Eve lost a big account to New Commercial Arts. Vodafone went from Ogilvy. Philips have put Ogilvy up for review. So it's obviously there's a trend. There's things going on at the moment. DFS have put Crow up for review. They've been with them for 10 years. So it's probably part of a broader trend. But certainly what I'm noticing is that the small, nimble, as we all keep saying, nimble, agile startups like you guys and like the others we mentioned appear poised to take advantage of the opportunity.
Yeah, and we'd be daft not to. So, as you say, for all the lovely things I just said about AMV, of course, we'd be daft not to take some advantage of the appetite from those brands to work in a different way and with different people. But again, it's all about your knowledge and your discipline. We've got all that knowledge, we've got all that experience. So we can do everything that they do, but in a very different feel to it. And that's ultimately what I think will make us successful and exciting and appealing. But then again, we'll go through these cycles of change, and then it's like, what in 5 years' time, what will it look like? In 10 years' time, what will it look like? And who knows? But if you think about that too hard, you get sucked into a rabbit hole, and you probably get stressed about things that may never happen. Yeah. So you just got to roll with it a little bit.
And you forget what's, I hate to sound like a trivial cliche, but you forget what's really important, don't you? Because what's important is there food on the table? Is the family doing okay? And things like that. And, in 1990 or so, Saatchi & Saatchi was the biggest monolith of advertising that had ever existed. And now it's one of many and is owned by another network. So, everything changes, everything comes and goes. And, like you say, we've come through probably the most significant crisis of our lifetimes. Hopefully it will be the most significant of the rest of our lifetimes. So I suppose we'll wrap it up there. I didn't ask you anything about music, so hopefully, vaccines pending and permitting, we're planning to take this down to London at some point, hopefully before the end of the year, just book out a studio and do some more chats for a few days. So hopefully we can do this in person next time.
Yeah, that'd be great. Anything in person would be good. You need a little bit of like a decompression time, because I'm sure if I actually met you in person, it would be something to make yesterday. It's like, do people do eye contact anymore? It's like, you're not used to it. How do you stand?
And I think we're going to experience the Zoom effect as well, where, so, when I first, this is so not cool for a music person to say, and I apologize to the people judging me, and I also apologize to Chris Martin, because I once went to see Coldplay. I was at the front of the stadium in 2012. It was a great gig. What happens when famous people come out in real life is you kind of double take, because something about your nervous system responds like they're actually fictional and you didn't expect them to be real. You only saw them on TV and on YouTube. I think we're going to meet loads of people in person after this who we've only seen on Zoom, and it surprises you how tall they are or something like that,
Yeah, definitely. That EQ, that moment where you read the person for the first time, is like, and there'll be a lot of people that there's these explosions going off in their brains of like, what?
Yeah.
I'm actually 7 foot. I'm very hairy, but
Zoom cancels it all out.
Yeah. It's just a filter this, so just do it for fun.
Brilliant stuff. Okay, well, it sounds like you have some growth to get on with, some business to win. So I can't take any more of your time, but I'm super grateful for you giving me as much as you have done. So I suppose thanks, and see you next time.
Thank you, mate. Yeah, see you next time.